I'm in Buffalo, New York for as little time as possible. This is one of the shadiest motels I think I've ever stayed in. Today we're heading to Massachusetts. I'm very excited. We're going to be going to Pittsfield, which will put me just a couple of hours outside of Kenmore Square in Boston. It's only 9:30 in the morning or so, and my upstairs neighbor has his music cranked up on the balcony. Hopefully you can't hear that. If you're lucky. I gotta get out of here, man. To say this place is shady feels like disrespect to actual shady places. Oh my god, what a nightmare this motel is. Oh, I'm not even sure I left my keys. I don't care. I just don't. They're doing some road work in this stretch of the country, and these roads are so difficult to ride on. They might not look like it. They're super chunked up, and there's all kinds of cuts in them and stuff, and it just makes the bike go left and right like crazy. It's like driving on ice. So as you can tell from, your eyes, the weather here today isn't really fantastic. And in fact, I think I'm going to be outrunning storms most of the day, including one that's about to blow through right now. It's humid. It's about 75, 78 degrees. It's just that uncomfortable amount of moisture in the air that makes you feel like you're about to get rained on real hard. Anyway, today's plan is we've got about 7.5 hours of riding time to get to Pittsfield, Massachusetts, which is kind of just over the border between New York and Massachusetts. It tells me I've got 317 miles and 7.5 hours, so that kind of feels like it's going to be a slow slog if I ever in fact get out of where I am. So this is the third time I've crossed America on a motorcycle. The first two times were last year. I went from Portland to Cape Cod on my V85 TT, and then I went from Cape Cod back to Portland on a different route, still on my V85 TT. And now, as I get back on Route 20, this marks my third time going across the country on a motorcycle, this time obviously on a Royal Enfield Himalayan 450. And then when I leave Cape Cod at some point next week, I'll be embarking on my fourth cross-country. I've been asked a bunch of questions about why and how and logistics and stuff. So I figured I'd take this video and sort of just talk about the why and the how and stuff you might be curious about riding across America on a motorcycle. One of the biggest questions that I get from people, whether it's friends and family or even sometimes on YouTube, is why? Why would you want to hop on a motorcycle and ride 11 days or whatever across the country when you could just hop on an airplane and be there in 5 hours? And while that's sort of a valid question, I guess, the answer to it is, why does anyone do anything? Why do people jog? I see no joy in jogging, but people do it and they enjoy it. It's kind of pointless, except for the exercise, of course. But I mean, you're not accomplishing anything, you're just running down the street. Well, in a certain sort of way, it's the same with riding across country on a motorcycle. There's a certain amount of endurance testing that comes along with it. How much can you actually take? And it's kind of fun to find out what your limits are. But more important, for me, anyway, it's not so much a question of why would I do it. It's more of a question of why wouldn't I do it. It's something that I feel like, in a weird sort of way, I almost have to. Like, since the first time I did it, it's become a part of me. It's become something that defines me as a person in my own brain. Not in the world, just in my own brain. I'm someone who likes to get on a motorcycle and ride clear across a continent. It brings me an immense amount of joy and satisfaction and a sense of accomplishment. It also brings me a sense of connecting with parts of a country that I would never otherwise see. My own country. And I'm meeting people who I would never otherwise meet. I'm seeing things that I would never otherwise see. And I'm experiencing things that I would never otherwise experience. And it's all because I'm on a motorcycle. It's vastly different than if I were doing this in a car. Riding across the country on a motorcycle attracts people to you. So if you ever think you're going to be lonely on a ride like this, chances are you're going to talk to more people than you would ever imagine. I get people coming up and always talking about the butt pad, and I've had numerous conversations about the motorcycle itself, and I've talked to probably at least 24 people about the motorcycle, and I would say 95% of those people had never heard of a Royal Enfield, and they were intrigued. And a couple of them actually wrote it down in their phone, like Royal Enfield Himalayan. I gotta go look that up when I get home. That's a sweet bike, and it's only $6,000. You know, stuff like that. And those conversations always lead to the person telling me about the bike that they used to have. Maybe they still have it, but they never ride it, or stuff like that. And they say, oh, you know, this is kind of inspiring. Maybe I should get back on that bike and do something like this someday. And I say, yeah, you should. But that's the why. The why isn't because I'm saving money. Believe me when I tell you, this is probably 10 times more expensive, probably a lot more than that actually, than just buying a plane ticket and going to Boston. This is not cheap. I mean, if you look at it, my hotel rooms are at least $100 a night. I've got gas, you know, I fill up twice a day or whatever it is. Food is surprisingly expensive because it adds up, and you don't think. You go into a store and you get, like, you know, an $8 sub and a $4 Red Bull or whatever the hell, and then but you do that twice a day or whatever over the span of a month, and that adds up. So it's not cheap, and it's not. And the why isn't because, oh, it's a frugal money saving venture. It is not. But in my book, it's worth every dime. It really is. I get asked a lot how I managed to take a month off to do these trips. Doesn't your how do you convince work to let you take 4 weeks off to go on a motorcycle ride? And this is where my luck and my privilege come in. I happen to work for a really fantastic organization that puts people before work, really. And my work knows how incredibly important this is to my mental well-being. And, you know, to be honest, I put in my vacation request a couple months ago and said, you know, basically the month of June I'd like to take off. And I kind of forgot to ask. Like, I put the request in formally through the computer. You know, I'm taking these 4 weeks off, but I kind of forgot to ask anyone, hey, is that okay? Is that going to cause a problem? Because I guess in my heart, I know what the answer is going to be. Of course not. You got to do what you got to do. You got to get out there and live your life because that's what you do. And to say that I'm a lucky guy when it comes to that is a complete understatement. So that's the how of how I managed to get the time off. And for some reason, it wants me to take a right onto Bullis Road, but I want to go straight because I want to stay on 20. I don't want to go down these rando roads. Rando roads. Wasn't he a rock musician or something? Anyway, people always ask me if I get bored. And my answer always has been no. Pretty much up until this trip when I got east of the Mississippi on Route 20 and had to go through like Chicago and Cleveland and all that stuff. And I'm not sure if I was bored or just completely frustrated, but it was a lot of stop and go and road construction and all kinds of horrible shit that just made that slog through that area just unbearable. And so yesterday I ended up for a little bit just saying I can't take this anymore, and I got on Route 90, the interstate, and I did that for a bunch of miles. And I've never been so happy in my life to be on an interstate. I was actually laughing to myself. I was so happy to just be going 75 miles an hour and getting nice cool wind through my wings and all that stuff, because up until that point I was an unhappy camper. So yeah, no, I don't ever get bored really, but I do get frustrated sometimes having to deal with just urban sprawl that sometimes you have to ride through, or people edging out and not waiting for you, stuff like that. somewhere between Buffalo, New York and Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And I'm riding, and I just happened to notice this is the site of last year's debacle when I was tucked under that overhang waiting for storms to pass when a tornado siren went off. You may remember that from the videos I shot last year on my cross-country trip. I was right under there, under that overhang. This whole parking lot was filling up with water from the rain. Oh my God. What the f does that mean? Oh. What the f is that? What the hell is that? Anyway, I need to get on the road because as I stand here, I look at the radar, there is a big bag of bullshit coming at me from the west. I just rode through a little bag of bullshit, which is why I'm wearing my Aerostitch, even though it's like 85 degrees and humid. But I think it's probably time that I get the hell out of here. So let me get the hell out of here and keep on trucking, and I will catch up with you in a few. So according to the internets, the average isolated storm moves at about 12 miles an hour. As you can see, I'm well ahead of this storm that's coming at me from the west. So if I keep on trucking, I should be able to stay ahead of it. Anyway, these cross-country adventures are made up of, 95% just kind of cruising along and relaxing and digging the scenery, and 5% of making memories. Will I remember that little rainstorm back there that I went through, 20 miles ago? I don't know. I might remember it because in context of this trip out, it's the only rain I've really hit. I've outrun a number of pretty massive storms, but as far as actually getting rained on, except for a few sprinkles here and there that never amounted to anything, that was the first rain that I ran into. So if I make it to Cape Cod, and that's the only rain that I run into, then I'll probably remember that. I'll also remember the fact that I got to stop in and see that little overhang that I spent time under last year. So that's another little memory. But on the whole, like I said, cross-country travel like this is mostly just chilling and looking at the trees, and 5% making memories. Yesterday I made a great memory when I stopped into Cleveland Moto and met Phil. That was fantastic. Way before that, I made a great memory when I stopped into Baxter Cycle for a couple of days and hung out with those guys and took a ride with Fuzzy and had breakfast. And the good thing, knock on wood, so far for this trip, is I don't really have any bad memories. I have things I can look back on and say I wish I had done different, like not sticking on Route 20 past Dubuque because it was just a nightmare. But on the whole, nothing bad has actually happened. I've had zero mechanical issues with the bike. I've had zero physical issues with my back, or even my hands are doing pretty well with my carpal tunnel syndrome. It all goes to show you that as much as you may be watching these videos saying, oh, that looks like fun, but I could never do something like that, trust me, you really can. It's really not all that hard. It's more of a mental game than it is anything. If you can get yourself into the mindset that you're just gonna push through and get to where you're going and not worry about the little things, you can have a tremendous amount of fun, or at least a tremendous amount of peace and relaxation on a ride like this. So that's my little bug manifesto about getting into the proper mindset for cross-country travel. In the end, this is one of the most rewarding things I think a person could do, at least for me. At least if you're into motorcycles and you're into travel, I can't understand why anyone outside of, financial constraints or time constraints or whatever, I don't understand why anyone wouldn't just strap a bag on the back of their motorcycle and just go. So after 3,453 miles over 70 hours just in the saddle, over, I guess it's been what now, 11 days? I'm just about to hit the border of Massachusetts. And it's finally hitting me that I've done this again. Welcome to Hancock, Massachusetts. The state I was born and raised in, Massachusetts. And I'm back. Well, it's kind of fantastic to be here. And I'm going to plug ahead. I only have a few more miles left to get to my motel. And then I'm going to hunker down for the night and head into Boston. Thank you all for joining me. It actually means a lot that you come on these little journeys with me. And until tomorrow, I'll see you on the next one. Welcome to Massachusetts. Oh shit. Okay, someone tell me what's going on.